welcome all of you here. We had a great tour this morning. Got to see all of Ashtabula County, just about. But I want to give credit due where it belongs. Janice Schweitzer and her staff, Barb Carr, Don, Jake back there, they helped put this all together. And Janice, of course, she took the out. She's on vacation and she's over in Germany, so she left us high and dry. But we also want to thank Mark Winchell, who did a terrific job. Marta Stone, who was not able to stay here, but Marta was the executive director of leadership of Ashtabula County. She works on many projects. She knows Ashtabula County inside and out, so we really thank her for her expertise. I just want to say thank you for coming and seeing where we live and what's out in Ashtabula County. So if you ever want to move and build, inexpensive and pretty, right? So I would like to introduce Brian Anderson, who's going to kind of summarize the trip, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for making it out to Ashtabula County here today. Hopefully it's not as far away as you all thought it was. It's certainly, people think it's a little bit further removed from the rest of the region than it probably really is. I mean, you can be downtown from this exit in probably 50 minutes, downtown Cleveland, and I know a heck of a lot of people who commute every day from Medina up 71 who spend at least that much time getting back and forth anyway, so it certainly is not as far as a lot of people think. So, my name is Brian Anderson. I am the Executive Director of the Growth Partnership for Ashtabula County. We are, the Growth Partnership is the economic development arm, or not arm, but organization for the county. So, asked to do this presentation sort of on behalf of an overview of the entire county, not just the economic development perspective. So, I know we have Mark here and some other folks. If I misspeak about different clusters and different areas of the community, certainly feel free to jump in. For those of you, most of you were on the tour this morning. We gave you a whole bunch of information in a really condensed period of time. So we're just kind of review some of the things and kind of give a quick summary, kind of what we talked about and what we saw here today. Ashtabula County is the largest geographic county in the state of Ohio. A little bit over 700 square miles. Put that in perspective, that's about 2/3 the size of the state of Rhode Island. That's an awful lot of area to cover for one county, especially in light of there being marginally just about 100,000 people or so in the county. As I mentioned earlier on the bus this morning, one of the unique things is that population number has actually been about flat for the last 40 years, within 1,000 or 2,000 every census since then. While certainly we've seen growth and then certainly we've lost population as a region, those numbers have remained about the same here in Ashtabula County. We have 3 cities, all north of 90 here in Ashtabula County, 7 villages, 27 townships, and 7 school districts. So it takes, there's quite a few political subdivisions covering a very large area here. I have 2 sort of parentheses or quotation mark concepts here, north of 90 and South County. That's sort of the cultural divide, so to speak, sort of the different areas that exist here in Ashtabula County. North of 90, it's about 75% of the population and about 20% of the land. That's where the highest level of concentration of industry as well as people and retail and those sorts of things. South County, pretty much everything south of 90, but specifically everything south of Jefferson, which is the county seat, sort of centrally located here in the county. And that's, obviously, if you flip those numbers for north of 90, there's a lot less people spread out over a lot more land in that portion. Here's a couple of maps. For those of you who were with us this morning, I'll kind of lay out where we were, to give you how little of the county we saw in our 3 hours on the bus there this morning. This is where we're at right there, at 90 and 534. We came down 534 to stop at the lodge, cut across Geneva on the lake here, stopped in the harbor area here briefly, crossed the river, down 11, and back across 90, and then stopping at the Harpersfield Covered Bridge before coming back. So really, you saw about 1/10 of the entire county on that 3-hour bus ride this morning. So it's always a challenge for us whenever we have visitors, is trying to do these types of tours, it's impossible to do it in a whole day, let alone a single morning. So certainly there's a lot more that even we were able to see here today. A couple other quick highlights, as I mentioned, from a planning, transportation perspective. 90 is our major east-west freeway. Route 11 connects the harbor and Ashtabula City all the way down to Youngstown into the Ohio River, so it's a lake-to-river corridor there. We do have 2 deep water ports, one here in Ashtabula, as well as one here in Conneaut. And certainly that is one of our efforts, is figuring out how we better use those assets. It has connection to rail and other transportation opportunities as well. So it's been historically underused in most recent history, mostly coal, iron ore, aggregate, other types of bulk commodities. There's a lot of acreage and a lot more opportunity than we're currently using for those. Also, I thought it was probably useful to share with this group kind of some of the land use here in the county. Only about 7% of the county is what we would categorize as urban, or residential, commercial, industrial. So only 7% of our land. As we didn't get to see a lot of the traditional cropland. We saw some of the grapes and wineries this morning, but about a third of our land here is actually in agricultural use. And you'll see a big chunk that is considered forested, so it's not agriculture, but it's not really being used for anything else. The other interesting thing is that 17% wetlands number. I'm almost positive that is about 5 times higher than all the rest of your other counties. I think Lake County is about 3% wetlands. So when you talk about development, either in terms of residential, commercial, industrial, or even trying to take some of that marginal agricultural land, that wetlands conversation is a huge conversation here in Ashtabula County. Like I said, wetlands percentage are about 3 to 5% in most of the other counties here in the area, and that's a product of our denser clay-based soil. So it's a very, very significant issue for us here. A couple of just quick comments about the overall economy, and we kind of give a very quick sort of hit and miss sort of different areas of it this morning on the bus. The largest area of our economy is still manufacturing and industrial here in Ashtabula County. It's about 20% of our economy here locally. Put that in perspective, the state average is about 11 to 12%. So we have a significantly higher percent of manufacturing here than in the rest of the state. Significant industries are plastics and polymers, chemicals, and some metal stamping and forging as well. Tourism, very important, very growing, a very growing part of the economy. Those of you who are on the bus, you certainly got a healthy dose of it from Mark Winchell here this morning. He certainly does a great job representing the tourism industry here in the county. Very much driven by Lake Erie, wineries, covered bridges. I think we did a good job hitting everybody over the head with that this morning as well. And it is a significant part of our economy. It grows more and more every year. I think we've seen in the numbers recently 5 to 10% kind of each time we take a snapshot. The sales and employment impact grows. The second largest portion of our economy in Ashtabula County is agriculture. So at the end of the day, Ashtabula County, like a lot of Ohio, we grow things and we make things. So about a third of the land is in use for agriculture. Primarily, land use-wise, it's corn and soybeans, your traditional commodity type of crops. We saw a lot of the grapes this morning. That's kind of falling in that value-added category. That is limited, as we learned this morning, by some of the viticultural areas dictated by the Grand River and Lake Erie. Another growing, no pun intended, initiatives we have going on is behind biomass. We had a company that's recently planted about 5,000 or 6,000 acres of miscanthus grass in the county to be processed, pelletized for renewable energy, for application of polymers, ethanol, a variety of different things. We have 50,000 or so fallow acres here in the county that would be perfect for this type of initiative, and that has crossovers into renewable energy as well as manufacturing and other applications. I wanted to talk a little bit about workforce, and I thought some of this was interesting. 13% of the workforce in Ashtabula County commutes in every day, and about 25% of our residents commute out of the county. Put that in perspective, those are very, very low numbers compared to a lot of the other counties in this county. About 50 to 60% of Medina County commutes out every single morning to go to their jobs, whether it's Akron or Cleveland, Lake County, I think it's about 40%. So to me, that tells me when I think about sustainability and regionalism, to some extent, we're a little more segregated here in Ashtabula County than a lot of the other counties. We have less people commuting in, and we have less people commuting out. So I think, and I don't know what the reason for that would be, or if that's necessarily a good or a bad thing, but I think there are opportunities for us from a business, market, educational standpoint to interconnect better with some of all the rest of you here in the region. While we are talking about workforce, I think a lot of you in this room, as well as a lot of you who are involved in economic development, know that is a major conversation in economic development and job creation right now is workforce development. And I ran some numbers a while back, looking at projections for where our current workforce is in the county in terms of age and when they project to retire for the next 5 to 10 years. And the numbers work out right now that based upon who we expect to retire every year, we expect about 1,200 to 1,500 people to retire out of our workforce every year for the next 5 to 10 years. The entire county, all of the high schools in the county, graduate less than 1,000 a year right now. So we're running a deficit every year for the next 5 to 10 years in terms of workforce. And there are already, going to be conversations about a shortage of qualified trained workforce how it is, especially with some of the resurgence in manufacturing and more advanced manufacturing, things like that. So it is definitely a major issue moving forward, as I know it is for most of the region. We talked a little bit about shale oil and gas, and we do expect it to have an impact here. This is an ODNR graphic here. As you see, the sweet spot for oil and gas extends into about the entire southern half of Ashtabula County. We really haven't seen much drilling yet here. We've been permits for a couple of test wells, a lot of leasing activity on and off by a variety of different groups. And we're still 2 or 3 years off from seeing significant impact here on the drilling side locally. And then, from my perspective, we look at the midstream and the downstream opportunities, what we do with that gas and oil in terms of processing and using it for chemicals and plastics and things like that. So it certainly is going to be a lot of challenges, and I know it is an emotional issue, a very passionate issue for a lot of people as well. So there are going to be environmental and land use implications for people to think about, but it certainly is going to present quite a few economic opportunities moving forward as well. Some of these words are my own, not necessarily representative of the entire county or elected officials, so keep that in mind. But when I've sat through some of these work stream meetings and been involved with this group, I thought about what does sustainability mean to Ashtabula County? And I don't know if I or people here in the county know that answer yet. This has been a great conversation and it's brought a lot of great people to the table. But sustainability in Ashtabula County means something significantly different than it does in Akron or Cleveland. And it's figuring out how we, both internally within Ashtabula County, think more sustainably, as well as how we plug into the larger region in terms of sustainable initiatives. As I've mentioned earlier, Ashtabula County, we face a lot of the major challenges of urban areas in terms of foreclosures and housing stock. For a period of time, the exodus of manufacturing jobs, even if we've seen some increase in that recently. But we also have all of the challenges of rural communities in terms of infrastructure and all these problems associated with it there. A lot of what it comes down to for this group, and especially for Ashtabula County, is how much do you emphasize maintaining your green space and environment and natural assets versus the desire to grow your economy, grow your population, and lead better. We have a lot of political subdivisions. We could be doing a lot more, sharing resources, doing a better job planning our infrastructure, and we've taken a lot of steps in that regard over the last 5 to 10 years. Connecting better with the region. This is certainly a very positive initiative here, and I'm glad that we've had such a great turnout here today. Learn a little bit about Ashtabula County and the different challenges that we face here, and how we can leverage these opportunities as well as take on some issues ourselves here locally. We talked a little bit afterwards about what is the equation for sustainability here in Ashtabula County, and I think we hit it when I was talking to Hunter earlier about what's in your genetic code. in terms of, and that translates to me for asset-based development. Whether it's agriculture, it's the wine industry, it's part of who we've been and what we've done. How do you leverage those opportunities? There's still a very strong manufacturing legacy here, so we still are really good at making things here. As Mark said on the bus, we're not Silicon Valley. We're not going to get the next Bill Gates to set up and start the next Microsoft in Ashtabula County, but figuring out what we are good at and how we can best leverage those opportunities and support those opportunities moving forward. I think that was a very, very quick synopsis of a lot of information we gave you this morning. There's my contact information if you ever wanted to follow up with me about anything regarding Ashtabula County or things that are going on here in Ashtabula County. Please feel free to reach out to me. Again, thank you all for being here today. Certainly, if anybody has any questions, please feel free. Otherwise, I will plan on handing over the agenda so you continue with your board meeting.
Well, thanks, Brian. I'd like to thank you and the elected officials here that hosted us in Ashtabula County this morning for a really great event. I think the hospitality that you showed, as well as the great job that you did showcasing your county to the rest of us, because it is geographically in the northeast corner of our region. I think a lot of us that don't get here as much as we would like to really saw a lot of neat things and saw how it is a microcosm of the region in a lot of ways. Before we get started with the official business, I wanted to just extend an opportunity if there are any other elected officials here that would like to introduce themselves that might be joining us late. I know you met Peggy Carlo earlier, the commissioner from Ashtabula County, who did the introduction, but I'd like to give that opportunity now. Okay, seeing none. One other group I did want to acknowledge, and if all of you could stand, is we do have a group of colleagues here from Erie, Pennsylvania, who are also embarking on a Sustainable Communities grant, and I believe that they have a 5-county tri-state region that they're dealing with, and they were awarded a grant 1 year after we were. So if anybody from Erie would like to stand up, and if you would like, go ahead and feel free to say a couple of things about your effort, and then we'll move on.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Michael Furman, and I'm the project manager for what we have called ourselves Destination Erie, a regional vision. And as was said by Jason, we're a 5-county project, and we're afforded the opportunity to watch how you are doing in Northeast Ohio. Thank you very much. We've careful to see some of the successes you've been able to move forward and some of the challenges that you're having, because regions tend to be actually quite similar as you go across the southern lake of Lake Erie. Up to our east, Buffalo is also moving in a 8-county sustainable development project as well. So the whole southern part of our lake is percolating with regional working. So we're glad to be here. As I was mentioning to some of your colleagues, from Erie, I see the commercials of Geneva on the lake for about 20 years, but I've never been here. So it was really good to see that here, and I think you've hooked my family. We'll be here probably one summer. But thank you all for enjoying it. We're very interested in see how you conduct your meeting today. I'd like to introduce our project manager, Ben Pratt, and head of our Chamber of Commerce, Jake Rao. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming out and joining us, and I think talking to some of you folks on the bus this morning, we will have a lot of opportunities for dialogue and sharing information, both on what to do and maybe what not to do as well. So thanks for joining us. To get the meeting started is our usual custom. I'd like to just go around the room and have the board members at the table introduce themselves. I'll start. My name is Jason Segedy. I'm the chair this year for Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium. I'm also the director of the Greater Akron Metropolitan Planning Organization, known as AMAT. So let's go to my right here.
Dan Manuel, I'm the vice chair. I'm from Warren County, representative from Warren County.
Hunter Morrison, executive director.
Tom Tyrrell, secretary and also vice chair of Regional Prosperity Initiative.
Commissioner Steve Hamley, Medina County, second vice chair, as well as a representative from NOACA.
Grace Galucci, treasurer, also the executive director from NOACA.
I'm Ed Juris, I'm the Director of Regional Collaboration for Cuyahoga County.
Mike Lyons, I represent the Regional Prosperity Initiative.
Mike Challenger, I'm with the Lorraine County Growth Partnership.
Don Romanchuk, Lorraine County Growth Partnership.
Jeff Dutton with SCATS, which is the MPO in Stark County.
Bob Now, Director of the Stark County Regional Planning.
Joe Hadley, Executive Director of NEOSCC.
Ron Shortis, Executive Director, Center for Urban Regional Studies, Youngstown State University.
John Getchie, Executive Director, Eastgate Regional Council of Governments, that covers Ashtabula, Mahoney, and Trumbull County.
Rachel McCartney with Eastgate Regional Council of Governments.
Kim Lee, representing Fred Wright, President and CEO of the Akron Urban League, Summit County.
Aaron Seidel with Summit County Department of Community and Economic Development.
Mark Moore from City of Akron.
Emily Campbell, the Center for Community Solutions.
Greg Brown, Executive Director, Policy Bridge.
Brad Chase, Lee Museum of Natural History.
Mary Beth Feek, RTA Cleveland.
George Barchar, Catholic Charities, Diocese of Youngstown.
Bill Davigan, City of Youngstown.
Angie Byington, Director of Community Development, City of Elyria.
I'm Skip Claypool, County Commissioner from Geauga County.
Cam Cochran's Deputy Director of Metropolitan Housing Authority.
Lucy Miller, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the Ohio Sustainability Officer.
I'm Peggy Carlo, Ashtabula County Commissioner.
Corey Minor-Smith, Stark Metropolitan Housing Authority. Kelly Harrison,
Okay, well, thank you for all joining us this afternoon, and also for those of you that are not on the board and joining us, we do have opportunity on the agenda at this point to give a public comment if you would wish. We normally ask that you take no more than 3 minutes, and I think I'd ask today if you do want to comment to step up to the podium just to make sure that we can all hear you. But if you do have a comment you'd like to share with the group on what we're doing or our business, I'd like to extend that opportunity right now. Okay.
Could you step into the podium? Sure. And state your name, please.
Is this the only time you get to say anything?
Well, I don't know. Never been to one of these.
My name is Dick Kudas, actually from Lake County. I am a concerned citizen of this end of Ohio. I have several questions. I have researched your organization, and I find that it's very vague. And I know my father taught me for years that devil is in the details. And so far this morning, and I hope I get some detail as you're talking, so far I've not gotten too many details. I also am very concerned that between your organizations, your board, and your executive committee, there are over 110 representatives. Ashtabula, I think, in counting, has 3, maybe 4. Lake County has 0. Geauga County has 0. My concern remains that as I look at those organizations, probably 95% of your organizations are from either Cleveland area, Akron area, or Youngstown area. I am not naive to believe. I have studied Agenda 21 for over 3 years. And I'm telling you that those 3 cities are affiliated with and believe in Agenda 21. I'm very concerned about that, and I am very worried that the only reason that you're here today is because you promised you'd visit every county. I'm concerned that the first 5 meetings were either in Cleveland, Akron, Youngstown, and I wonder why in the world, if you would like an answer, please, would this end of Ohio feel we will get a fair representation into your organization of mostly appointed officials, not elected. In your literature, I have never seen anything talking about a vote of the people. All I see is what you're going to do. You're going to control my land. I think you're going to want my taxes, and I think those will go to those core cities which are urban. I also know that you have received over $4 million in funding from the federal government through HUD. HUD says housing and urban development. As I look around the room, I see a lot of urban development. I see very little suburban or this end of Northeast Ohio's representation. This concerns me greatly, and I am greatly concerned as I look at your groups, and I have researched it, goals which are very vague. They are very close to, if not exactly the same, as Agenda 21. And I'm absolutely opposed to that. I'm opposed to the organization, and I would think that this end of Ohio deserves far more representation in an appointed committee that wants to control my liberties and this community that I live in. I thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comment, and I think since you did offer quite a few questions for the group, I will give an opportunity if anybody would like to respond at this time, but one thing I would suggest to the chair is, since this is being captured and recorded, we might be able to kind of take your questions one by one, get back to you in writing, and have some dialogue with you that way. Any further comments? Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
My name is Mary Munker. I am from Stowe, Ohio. I received this notice. I've not been to your meetings before. I received this from a councilman in Hudson, and in the notes, he said that you were going to discuss goals and policies that address the region-wide challenge of residential commercial abandonment and the need for affordable, accessible, code-compliant housing throughout the region. Living in Stowe, they tried about 2 years ago to pass inspections on our personal property, rentals, and our homes. I purchased a copy of the code book and a copy of the International Property Maintenance Code. I took a copy of the proposed ordinance to then Senator Grendell, who is now a judge. He threw it on the table and said, "This is communism." I knew it was. I am very concerned. All of you here, do you not have children? Do you not have grandchildren? What are you thinking? Is this what you want? Do you want people coming to your home and inspecting? Do you want your money going, spreading the wealth and sharing the wealth like communism? That's exactly what this is. I am concerned of why it's not in the newspapers, why people aren't being told what you're doing. And I am concerned when they want to bring inspections to my private property, because with Agenda 21 and with communism, socialism, fascism, whatever you call it, they always take your private property. All of you people supporting this, have you read your Constitution, your Bill of Rights? Is this what you want for your children? Please, I hope you have a conscience. I hope you think of what you're doing.
Thank you. Any other comments from the group before we get started? Sure.
Okay, my name is Skip Claypool, County Commissioner out of Johnson County. I'm here on a discovery. Grace and Ed both know me. We sit in NEOSCC together. But I have a question for you, and by raise of hands, I'd like to know how many people here know what Agenda 21 is. If you know what it is, raise your hand. Okay. That means there's a huge number of people here who don't know what it is. I suggest you find out. Anybody who does not think that it's something real and a threat, you need to go to, and there's a lot of Democrats sitting here, Peggy and others, but do me a favor, go to the Republican National Committee website and look up a resolution on Agenda 21. This is a real threat. It's not some conspiracy. And I've already had this conversation with Gracie. One of the things that I'm doing as a county commissioner is I'm discovering the web and the threads that run through our government. I do not think for a second that the people sitting at this table, you are bad people. I don't think that intentionally you would do anything to harm our region, to harm our country. I think that all of you have the best intent. Unfortunately, what I'm discovering is that many will not take the time to do the discovery necessary to do your jobs. We just endorsed a program called MAP 21, and is an NPO. The people who are sitting at this table is an NPO. Have you read MAP 21? It's 1,600 pages. It's like our healthcare bill. Read MAP 21. You may discover something you don't like in that 1,600-page bill that was passed to our Senate and Congress. I'm going to implore you. There are threads running through the laws that are being passed by individuals within our government that are doing harm to this country, to the fundamental premise that this country was founded on. Our constitutional basis, private property, individual private property rights, those sorts of things. When I hear the term sustainability, when I see decisions being made based on environmental justice, and if you're in an NPO, you know that that's a term that's used, that's a decision criteria. As a citizen of this country, I get concerned. So I'm gonna ask you to search your hearts a little bit. Again, I don't think that you're bad people. I think you all want the right things. And by the way, I have a degree in regionalism, and so I know something about the topic of regional studies and what regional focus happens to be. But I'm concerned when I look at some of the laws in the guts of what we're passing. I've read the healthcare bill. I've seen the guts of what's in that bill. I've read all three versions, as much work and effort and time consuming as that was. I'm concerned what I see. And so I'm going to implore you. I know that a lot of you, your eyes are rolling back on your head. You're not concerned because you don't see this as a threat. There is a threat to this country, to the fundamental foundation of this country. And I'm going to ask you, as a citizen of this country, thank you to this lady over here for saying this. You know, some people don't resonate because of our outspoken commentary and so forth. But do your homework. There is some real stuff going on out there that we need to be concerned about because it's undermining the fundamental foundation to this country. So as a commissioner, I'm trying to discover what you guys are all about. I have no clue. I'm going to judge you based on what I see, what I hear, based on your actions. I'm not going to base you based on innuendo and, you know, all the hearsay that comes from other individuals. I'm going to base it on what I see, what the actions are, and what I find and what I discover. I'm taking back to the other two county commissioners in Jogga County. I'll have a discussion with them about that. So I'm just going to implore you. Don't roll your eyes when you hear citizens, your constituents, concerned. Address those concerns. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner, and we do look forward to working with you in the future. And I would, Jeff Anderley, if you could raise your hand, I would like to direct if people do have comments or you would like to get more information. I think it is incumbent on the consortium to be able to answer the types of questions that were brought up today by members of the public. So if you do contact Jeff after the meeting, you can get him whatever you're comfortable getting him, an email address, an address, and we can work on establishing some correspondence and dialogue with you. And I think on behalf of the consortium, invite you to stay active, involved, you know, whether you feel like you like what we're doing or not like what we're doing, it's your democratic right, obviously, to say that. So thanks for being engaged. Any other questions, comments before we move on? Okay, seeing none. I would like to just say, since we did have the public comment period, in order to allow the board to go through the business of the meeting, I would ask if you're not a board member that you refrain from participating in the actual agenda of the meeting. But like I said, we want to continue to work in dialogue with you as this process goes on. First order of business is item 3A, which is the minutes of the September meeting. I believe those were in everyone's packets, and at this point, I would ask for a motion. Motion by Mr. Challenger. Second, Mr. Lyons. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next order of business was item 3B, which was a report on the executive committee meeting that we had earlier this month. I didn't have anything in particular as chair to report on that, but I will invite Hunter or any other executive committee members if you would like to report out on anything from that meeting at this time.
Several members who wish to
should participate in NEOSCC activities this has some information on contact information and where people's experiences, their professional experience. This will help us know who to contact when we have projects that come up so that we can start scheduling this out throughout the remainder of the grant period and beyond. And so we have information here on technical skills. People can fill out where their competencies are so we know how to program. And also a section here on what projects people are interested in working on throughout the rest of the grant period. And so we should be familiar to everyone here, the visioning, the scenario planning, different projects are listed out there. So please do take a minute to think about who in your organization you would like to tap to help us as we move forward in the next year. And when you do receive the survey, please forward it on to those people in your organization. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them right now. Just running you through so I'll be a little bit familiar when you do get this. Any questions?
You may have mentioned, to be clear, one survey per organization?
No, this is for everyone in the organization who you want to work on the project.
Should individually fill out a?
Correct. And that's why I forwarded it on and just follow up with those people in the organization to make sure that they did complete it. It's fairly easy. It should take no more than 5 to 10 minutes. Just a little longer, more daunting than it really is, but just some basic questions on availability, what their skill sets are, and that sort of thing. Anyone?
And this is for the remainder of the grant period that you're?
Yeah, there's actually a section down here where you can note your availability for each month as we move forward.
And Sarah, you may have mentioned this already, but any anticipated date when you'd like to have it back by?
November 2nd.
November 2nd, okay. I think this is a great idea. Kudos to the people that came up with it, because I think, as we talked about bringing the planning consultant on board to help with the project, that one of the issues was we wanted to make, the best advantage we could of the resources that we already have under our disposal in each of our member organizations. I think this looks like a great way to find that information out.
And this is essential both from the perspective of the individual organizations meeting your match agreements, so you can track and see where it looks like you're going to be and where there might be some holes in that. And as you recall, this is a critical part of the local match to the federal funds. So, in fact, the agreements will over match at this point, but only if in fact how we're going to spend it on.
Before we move on, any other discussion either, I think, on the survey or just on the concept of leverage match, any questions or things that you think the consortium should be thinking about as far as resources go as we move through the commission?
Quick question, is that November 2nd?
November 2nd.
It looks like we made it through the last survey, okay, well, this one's a little bit shorter, so.
Yes, it's much.
Don't be afraid. Thanks.
Chairman, Emma Barcelona will take the next 2 items, financials on the public comment.
I think it's easier from up here so nobody has to turn around. So in your packets, you have our standard financials and cash position program through the end of September 30th. We're ahead in all categories in the budget. You can see where we are, and then also where we are with the consortium match as it relates to the total program. Any questions just overall on where we are in the budget? So the cash position, you'll see our receipts from last month and then disbursements as well. To date, we've received just over $1.5 million in combined draws from HUD as well as our cash match from organizations. This next item is our open and pending contracts report or memo. There is where you'll see what amounts have been approved for the various contracts we have open and the expenditures to date in those contracts. for pending invoices. Since last month, there's actually been no change, at least in contracting. The one big one actually relates to the memo following this, which is relating to the RFP for planning management, that's regional planning management, scenario planning, and fiscal impact analysis. That just closed yesterday. There's a memo that explains what each of those three elements are and the plans moving forward. I will report at this time, we did receive a total of 7 responses, 3 for the planning management and 6 each for the fiscal impact and the scenario planning. There were 3 respondents that actually applied for all 3 sections. The remainder replied for 1 or 2 of the sections. Thank you to all of you that are on the committee for review. If anybody else is interested in being involved, please let me know as soon as possible so we can see if there would be a good fit for you in the review process. So the dates to note here that are important, obviously yesterday we closed the RFP and we received them. We have one applicant who's in a curing period right now where they need to provide a little bit more information. They look like they'll be doing that, so again, we'll have 7 responses. The committees will be meeting, reviewing and interviewing. The date for you to watch is November 20th at 1 p.m. This will be a few days, if everything goes to plan, after the committee will have made a selection for one or all of those contracts. We'll be hosting a webinar or web meeting, so to speak. We'll provide the information via email, so if you'd like to call in and learn about the entire process, ask about what happened, how decisions were made, anything along those lines, we wanted to provide you that opportunity prior to the board meeting the following Tuesday. So just watch for that. Again, we'll provide any information out. But you do have committees that have staff and board members and other representatives involved, so you do have some people reviewing these. And then finally, the biggest thing really is that we will be looking for likely action at the November meeting. Again, we'll have anywhere between 1 or possibly 3 contracts that will likely be looking for approval in order to enter into agreement and a contract with those firms so we can start work on this next phase, the visioning phase, as needed. So again, that's why we wanted to provide you as many opportunities as possible to ask questions and get input prior to that bill coming before you. Any questions on open or pending contracts or this RFP? Again, please just send me an email or give me a buzz if you'd like to be involved in this review process, and we'll be sure to incorporate you into that.
Emma, just one question, then do we anticipate an approval at the November board meeting for the contract, or it's, okay?
Yes, and it could be just 1, or if we're ready to go and if the committees all agree, it could be up to 3 contracts depending on the needs. Of course, if we go with just one firm, then it'll be something, but absolutely, in order for the progress, we need to get them under contract as soon as possible.
Thank you. Any other questions for Emma?
Thank you.
All right, that takes us through item 4, the next 4A, I should say. The next item is 4B, which is organizational work, kind of on the process, the work streams, and caucuses, and I will turn that over to our executive director on that.
Mr. Chairman, both Jeff and I think will make a presentation on a couple of things. First of all is what you have on your table today. We've had a number of presentations on the organizational work we went through this summer and how it all fits together. And I think one of the results of our discussion at the executive committee, and thanks particularly Joe Hadley for suggesting this, is that there are a lot of specific terms. There are consultants that we refer to, and there are structures such as the work streams and the organizational caucuses that we've introduced. And what we have a need to also have a kind of a look-ahead calendar so that you've got essentially a script notes on the process. Jeff will take you through the document in terms of the components of it, but it's meant basically to summarize both objectives, the schedule, the definition of different act towards, and the broad terms such as what is scenario planning, what is a dashboard, et cetera. So Jeff, if you can walk us through this, we will be updating this every month so that you can walk away from the meeting with a sense of where we're headed. And last meeting, we did pass out the one sheet look ahead calendar. We'll come back to some of the key things on that. But these are two devices that came out specifically as a result of the board survey that spoke to the need for crisper communication and not overwhelming people with multiple emails. And this is our effort to respond to that. Again, work in progress. If you have comments or suggestions, please let us know.
Current theme throughout the survey, as we talked about last month, in terms of being able to enable board members and other members of the consortium community to really understand at a glance what's going on and kind of wade through all this terminology. And so what we decided to come up with is, I guess you could call it a placemat. It's something that Brad Chase knows that we talked very early on in the communications and engagement workstream about, in terms of just having a placemat so we can kind of chart our progress at every board meeting. So we expanded on that concept a little bit, fundamentally to cover a couple major things. We wanted you to have a 3-month outlook to know, upcoming impending deadlines, upcoming impending processes that are undergoing, as well as different dates for you to keep in mind in terms of your schedules. So we've done a 3-month outlook on that. I think as we pull this together, we can kind of start to clean this up and maybe even put it into more of a categorized feature where everything related to scenario planning is here, everything related to the board is here. But so far, the feedback that we've got is it's been communicated pretty well. We kind of tested it on the staff and a few other people. So that's the major component of it. To the right of that on your sheet is the project team. And what we tried to do, in particular, was identify kind of on an ongoing basis so we can understand the difference between the product teams, the original work streams, and these new caucuses that we're forming. So there's small definitions there. And then lastly, and this is a suggestion that Gene Nixon at the Health District came up with. He's having a hard time keeping track of the consultants, so we thought we would put those on there as well, with just kind of simple definitions of who's working on what. So if you're contacted by someone, you kind of know the context of that. Along the bottom is a project schedule at a glance, and it's a 2-part schedule. The first 6 months are on the front, and the next 8 months are on the back. And really what we try to do is just take a snapshot of the schedule along 3 lines. The first being the scenario planning process, the second being the regional analysis of impediments for fair housing choice process, and then the bottom one being the products, the toolkit, the dashboard, policies, and pilots. And we've started to plug some data in there, and I think that this is tightened up, particularly once the other consultants come on board, and we know the calendar for 2013 much clearer. But we did put in some milestones on the calendar, and this again was a suggestion, I think, of Joe's, that we can kind of understand what are the board milestones and when they're going to be making decisions on certain things. So you can see the board milestones marked there, as well as blocks for work streams and caucuses, and we feel those will be coming together and integrating into the process. On the back side, we decided to continue kind of this theme of the glossary. And so we went through and we defined some of the different terms and vocabulary that we toss around pretty easily in the office, but still might be confusing for you. So we talk about Vibrant NEO 2040, which is the name of the work plan. We have the creation of the vision and the framework over the next year. Scenario planning, which of course is a process and tool of how we're going to get there. The regional analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, which is something Anthony's going to be talking about in a couple minutes. The dashboard, which actually Joe's going to be talking about that after Anthony, kind of looking at indicators throughout the region. And then the toolkit, policies, and pilots, the 3 other tools that we'll be working on in the next 14 months. To the right of that are the 6 livability principles from HUD. As you know, that's been a part of both our original and our updated work plan, and something that's in effect put a lot of the structure in place when we were developing work streams over a year ago. And then at the bottom is just the next 8 months of the calendar, so this will be updated, so we'll start losing months as we go forward. But again, this is something that we want to pilot with you today. As always, we're open to suggestions, whatever you think would make it more clear for you. If there's things along the way that we need to take off and add other things too, we'd be more than willing to do that. So that kind of coupled with the 5 points list that we sent out last month and then repeated today, really kind of helped to focus kind of your energies or your thoughts about what's going on in the process, what you need to be made aware of, and hopefully how you can inform your boards about certain things that are occurring within the consortium at any moment.
Mr. Chairman, I think I would suggest that we take this matter up as a sort of a standing item on our executive committee agenda, so that if you have any comments, either get it to an executive committee member or just let us know directly. But we're committed to refining this so that you have what you need in terms of the information and the schedule in a way that keeps everybody focused. I think if we revisit it every month for a while at the executive committee level, we'll see advancement on the communication side. I would also like to point out on the 5-point November list, this Friday, the Quality Connected Places work stream, which is the last work stream is actively involved in phase 1. Is having a charrette from 1 to 5 at the Uncork Gallery in Akron. This group has been looking at place making tools over the course of the summer. I think the sort of graphics and concepts that go into scenario planning, for those of you who remember the presentations about templates and the like, looking across the region at what makes Northeast Ohio special and unique. And this is an effort to bring some of those ideas together for the afternoon so that we can complete our work and have that to feed into the scenario planning process itself. So board members are invited and encouraged to attend. If you would like to do that, please let Paris know. I believe that concludes this part of the agenda.
Any questions for Hunter and Jeff, or any discussion on the information? Yeah, George.
Not a question, I just wanted to say that I think this is very helpful, and thanks for all the work putting that together.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely, Hunter, thank you to you and your staff. Not forcing me to trust my memory. It's nice to have something graphic.
Okay, I think that takes us to item 4C, which is the Vibrant NEO 2040 Work Plan Report. There's a couple items under here. The first one we'll start with is the September HUD monthly report.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, we are required by HUD to produce a monthly report, and as part of the Internal Communications Initiative, we're including that. It's the raw report, means all the data. We've sent this out now 2 or 3 months. And my understanding, based on the absence of comments, that this is useful in this form. Again, if the board wishes us to do some refinements, editing of this document for your purposes, please let us know, and we'll take it up at the executive committee meeting. But this is basically the progress report that we submit every month to HUD, outlining what we're doing in each and every area of our activities. The next reports are going to be going from staff, from Anthony Kovac on the analysis of regional analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. Joe McDonald will present an update on the dashboard, and Jeff will unveil the new website, and then finally we'll have an engagement update. So it's ready with the first presentation. What we would like to do in this part of the agenda, Mr. Chairman, is have the staff assigned to different products and processes bring the board up to date in some more detail than you can get from reading the report. So we propose to take two of the significant efforts this month, and time permitting, we'll take 2 or 3 in the subsequent months, so that's a constant item, and you can drill down on the topic and also on the progress.
Hi, thanks, Hunter. Again, my name is Anthony Kovac. I'm the project manager to the Housing and Communities work stream. Also within the Housing and Communities work stream, the people that are involved with that work stream, there was a subcommittee that was created, which we call the Regional AI. And in the agenda item, it says that we're going to, the understanding of the regional analysis of attendance and fair housing choice. Understanding is subjective, because I know that around this room we have some people maybe hearing the term for the first time, and other people that they're heavily immersed in this type of work. So I'm going to do my best to speak kind of to the middle, but also yield to people that are not as familiar with it, and try to explain how it plugs into our larger NEOSCC planning process. I'm also the manager of the toolkit and practices product here. And depending on how the RFP goes for the scenario planning, looking at the organizational chart, my role is managing the regional AI. That'll be shifted away from me and managed by the planning consultant at that point. So, but over the next few months, and actually through the work stream work, I've been working on the regional AI. So, here we go. The regional AI, which I'll refer to as that going forward instead of the regional analysis of competitiveness and fair housing choice, kind of like NEOSCC, Northeast Ohio State. There's another term that I want to explain to people. It's the FHE, it's the Fair Housing Equity Assessment. Through our grant application and our award, HUD has instructed that we have to do an FHEA. We don't have to do a regional AI. But early on in the process, while staff was all coming on board and we were all just learning about our roles and how to execute the application, it was understood by me early on in reaching out to the workstream members that we made the decision to go with the AI. Hopefully, at the end of this 15-minute presentation, you understand those compelling arguments to do that. But I did want to at least lay out the difference between an FHEA and a regional AI. There's 2 slides on this. There's 9 categories or 9 elements. And for example, background, there's a little description of each one. As you can see, right now, doing the FHEA route, which we're required to do, or the fair housing or the regional AI, they're exactly the same. This slide, one thing I want to point out is they both deal with fair housing. It's just one is much more all-encompassing, much more, if you would, more sustainable for our purposes. The protected classes are race and ethnicity for an FHEA. The regional AI are all protected classes. Another slide, I'm going to explain what all those protected classes are, but there's 7 throughout the United States that everyone understands and connects with. Ohio has 2 additional. But as you see, it's exactly the same between the 2. So there's no real question of why we would do one or the other. This second slide, we get into some differences, and I'll explain those. These are the rest of the elements. Our first difference comes in the standpoint of the physical infrastructure. And of the sustainability principles from HUD that our application really rallies around, this element embodies most of those principles. When we talk about housing, near jobs, and if we're not near jobs, how do we get people to those centers of jobs? That's the transportation linkage. This component deals exactly with that. In our regional AI, we are going to be looking at that. The CAP platform starts to look at that. all of the work streams kind of, in some cases we're in their own areas, their own silos, but our planning process is about having all of our work overlap and connect and feed into the Vibrant NEO 2040 plan and those products. For the regional AI, it's only recommended that we do this, but we're definitely doing this. We're definitely including this element in our regional AI. The next element basically just says, do we look beyond those elements that we just talked about in the last slide and this slide? It's optional for the FHEA, but in regional AI, we're absolutely looking above and beyond what are those impediments that prevent people from having fair. It's kind of hard. I want us to talk about so much and so many angles right now, but it's very difficult because this is, on one level, very complicated stuff, but on another level, it's pretty simple. The Fair Housing Strategy and Action Plan, optional for the FHEA, required for certification. The action plan is something that, if you're an entitlement community, and I'll touch on one of the entitlement communities in a moment, you already know that this is something you have to do. We're going to have not only a regional AI completed at the end of July of next year, but it's also going to have an action plan, an individual action plan for each entitlement community. And then obviously the conclusions are the same for each. The definition for the protected classes, like I said, are these 7: race, color, religion, sex, disbelief, national origin. Right there, if you're doing an FHEA, it's race and ethnicity. So you eliminate a lot of these other classes to, in my mind, this is all done to create Northeast Ohio in a more sustainable light. How can you say that you're sustainable or looking at creating a place that's enjoyable and gives options to all people and all backgrounds if you're just looking at the FHEA? So that's the one motivating reason to make that extra step. Another one is, well, here are the 2 other protected classes that are additional: ancestry and military status. So there's 9 protected classes that we're going to look at through our process. But also HUD, in a number of documents, there's more than 4, but 4 key ones, that says you have to do your FHEA, but we will support you and we will help you and we encourage you, strongly encourage you to take that next step for the regional AI. So we're also, another reason to go that extra step is because HUD is explaining it to us to do that, and they're saying in their description is taking it just a little further. So as I showed you on those charts, there's not much of a difference. It's not a big stretch to do this. So that was another reason to do this. Another reason to take that next step into a regional AI is, and for the people in the room that are more practical and it's all about dollars and cents, this part's for you. I'm going to touch on another reason why we should do a regional AI. But how many are entitlement communities by a show of hands throughout the board? Okay, so I mean, close to half. So you know what I'm talking about. Even non-entitlement communities are required to do an analysis of impediments if they're receiving state funds. But the encouraging thing to know is that HUD is, and we're working on a specific letter directed to our communities to answer this. It's answered in other HUD documents, but not as directly as maybe our entitlement communities want to have happen. But our regional analysis of impediments, the Fair Housing Choice Plan, will stand in for or take the place of these entitlement communities or non-entitlement communities that currently conduct an analysis of impediments every 3 to 5 years. So there's a community in our consortium, their last, it's a city, their last AI cost them $23,000. They're just gearing up to start the AI process now. I met with them and I said, stop, don't do it, make sure you partner with us. They said, I'll believe it when my HUD representative tells me. I want to believe you, Anthony, but you're asking too much. I mean, we can't stop the wheels here. But they were at least convinced to say, we'll hold the wheels off off for a little bit until we get that interaction with HUD, that commitment. Other community, it's a county, just got through finishing their AI process. So their benefit is not to save $30,000 that they just spent on the process, but the annual action plan that is listed in our table, that has to be done every year. So for 2013, the action plan will be done, so that time and money and effort from any community, entitlement or non-entitlement, that does an AI, at least the action plan is something they don't have to worry about. And then the timing doesn't always work out with their study when it's complete or when ours starts, but our regional AI goes for 5 years. So when some other communities' AI ends, they have some buying time to just partner with our organization through the remainder of the 5 years. At the end of 5 years, I don't know what happens. Will NEOSCC be here? I hope so. I think so. I think that's what we're all striving towards. But it'll be another discussion for another time. So that's some practical reasons. And here's a list of the 22 entitlement communities, 18 cities, 4 counties, and then the cities kind of swing around on this side. Entitlement, and anyone wants to add to this, they can. It's basically receiving money from HUD, and the main program is the Community Development Block Grant money, based on a minimum population of 50,000 people, and I think there's also based on need, get you to be labeled as an entitlement community. But if you're outside those 22 communities, we have 393 communities in our 12-county region, there's still money to be received through the state. So there's still a benefit, there's still an interest in partnering with our process. Another compelling reason, if you've been discriminated against for housing, or know a family member that has housing advocates that are involved with our consortium, that's another compelling reason to be involved with this. It's not just about dollars and cents and trying to save money and collaborate regionally. It goes beyond that. Fair housing is about equal opportunity and access. If you're a family, with more than 2.2 kids, there's some communities you just can't live in because you don't have that housing that's available. Or I wanted to share a story, and I wanted to embarrass Anna DeSantis from Mahoning County from the Office of Management, Budget, Grants, and Fair Housing. That I've talked with a lot of people in all 12 counties, and I just wanted to have her reiterate a story she said to me that I think puts this in the context, puts a name and a face. It's more than just fulfilling a requirement for a grant. Anna, thanks for
Thanks, Anthony. I am from Mahoning County, and I'm the Fair Housing Coordinator, also for the City of Struthers and Campbell in Mahoning County. One of the things, we have to perform the AI and also quarterly meetings and so forth throughout the thing, but Anthony wanted me to share this one call with you. And that was a gentleman called me, this was probably sometime last year, called me, and he was of Indian descent, and he had started talking to me, and he said that he had tried to rent a condominium in one of the suburbs, and the gentleman told him that it was not available. He felt like this was not quite on the up and up, so he took it upon himself, which the Ohio Civil Rights Commission will actually do for an individual in a community, but he took it upon himself to call the gentleman back, and he changed his voice. And he changed his voice while he was telling me this story. And he sounded like you or I. And I was like, what? And when he called back and had changed his own voice, the gentleman offered to show him the condominium. And this is a professional in the medicine field, and still just a year ago being denied housing. And just one other thing I'd like to add, and I always use this slogan when I go to meetings and try and let people understand the point of fair housing. And the bottom line is you have the right to live where you can afford to live. And nothing else should really, all the other things that you're putting into play, that's the bottom line, is that you can live where you can afford to live. So,
Yeah, and affordable housing isn't necessarily fair housing. Now, there's a distinction there. Some people think fair housing is affordable housing. Right. This is back to that slide, and I hit on those 3 points. This 4th point here is the regional AI will be incorporated into the final NEOSCC plans. There's one another HUD document that's out there. There's 2 elements to it, and this not only will the regional AI process be important to our planning process, but it will tie into, it'll connect with the scenario planning. There's 2 items in the HUD document that reference, one they call the bridge. And what HUD refers to is the bridge. It's, you don't want to just create findings for impediments or problems within communities that are identified. How do you translate those into actionable action steps or strategies or implementation? That's the bridge, going from findings to action steps and implementation. And HUD is looking for that in our process. And I think that it ties into our process perfectly with scenario planning. The other component is engaging with the consortium members in meaningful dialogue. It's said kind of in that terms too. So that's at a minimum. The timing isn't really the best for how it's all laying out with scenario planning and our regional AI. We don't get done until July, but we're going to make it work the best we can in the 3-year 12-county planning process. There's no extension from HUD, but that's okay. So there might be in the future, I'm not sure. Just real quick, I want to just highlight the entitlement communities, just how they look on a map. It's the same map there in the hard copy form. And your tan areas are your county entitlement communities, and the dark areas are the entitlement cities. And you can see there's pretty much it divides the county into 2 divisions of your non-entitlements on either side, split by the entitlement communities. Let me go back real quick. This last point too, the other part of it is this fair housing, this regional AI study will divide impediments by the entitlement communities, bubble up to the housing markets, bubble up to a region as a whole. So you see each, in a way, even though we're doing a regional AI, each entitlement community will be able to pull out their own AI to this process. And then we'll aggregate the information on a housing market level. We've identified 6 housing markets through our housing communities work stream, and then ultimately to the 12-county region as a whole.
Anthony?
Yes?
Can you explain how a community or a city is identified as an entitlement community? Is it CDBG related?
Yes. Yeah, and it's the $50,000 threshold population, and I think need is also tied in there, right?
Population.
It's just population?
No, it's population, and then we have cities that were designated by specific criteria, such as the city of East Cleveland, which was poverty, literacy, and light.
Okay, so that's not when I say need, that's another component. The proposed schedule, we started in September with another subcommittee to the Housing Communities Workstream was packaging an RFP for the regional AI, and then we had some of those members and others, Housing Community Workstream members, sit on the review committee and recommend to the board here for selection. The orientation meetings are now wrapped up between entitlement and non-entitlement communities. We're now in data, we've been in data collection. One of the data collection elements, which you'll hear more about and as consortium members to get out to the masses of who you know, we have actually 2 surveys that are happening in mid-November, and they reference fair housing. One is going to be on the standpoint of government officials, and the other one is going to be from the standpoint of housing industry stakeholders. And real quick, the stakeholders are developers, bankers, fair housing advocates, tenant rights representatives, special needs population representatives, property management firms, and those types of people and organizations. Then we analyze that data through January through March, and then the draft and final reports happen April through July, and then we culminate in July. So with that, Thanks for your time. Any questions? If not, I know I was getting the high sign and moving along. So. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Lucy.
Did you get an answer from Fair Housing, HUD Fair Housing in Columbus about release of a letter to Bill and Youngstown?
Not yet. And that was what I was referring to without getting into details was we wanted to give the communities very specific, direct language to this regional AI process, which takes the place of a local AI process. And the city of Youngstown, W. Evnon, wrote a letter to his Fair Housing HUD representative, basically asking that language. You know, we knew the answer, which was absolutely, but to make it official and in a letter, that was coming, and that's still coming.
I'll follow up.
And when that happens, we'll definitely, Bill, I mean, you wanted to do it as a model letter to share with everyone. But the response is going to be not only to specifically the city of Youngstown, but apply to all communities in the Fulton counties, entitlements and non.
I had a couple why-related questions. I think as you were presenting it, one of the whys I heard you say is we're doing this because HUD would like us to look at it, which is a very good why. But I was hoping that there would be maybe some other application for it. So another thing I heard you say was one of the whys is also because we've got these multiple entitlement communities and some money can be saved perhaps by analyzing them at once. The first question I had was, do you know how much money might potentially be saved? And then the second question, which is maybe more for Hunter, but you could weigh in obviously too, is strategically, how does this analysis fit in with the livability principles and some of the other more strategic objectives of the consortium, if it does?
Perhaps I can try to take a stab at both, actually.
Okay.
We did, when the Assistant Secretary of Fair Housing was in Cleveland, I believe in August, and talking about this approach that really comes from the Secretary's office, that they would like to see regions look at this assessment of fair housing impediments in both individual communities. We asked them to suggest that they monetize. That basically, individual communities, and Bill's here is one that I know several other representatives are here. Individual entitlement communities go out every 3 to 5 years and do these studies. They go to a small group of consultants, probably a half a dozen, who go into the census and have to do field work, and for $30,000 to $60,000 do the study. Emma Barcelona was in Lakewood doing that sort of work before she joined us. The Assistant Secretary said, we think this is going to be saving money. We suggested that we add that up, and are working with Lucy to find out how much this region spends doing redundant work as a condition to getting money from the feds. And can we save money from this essentially from consulting work, which we put to program activities by, as a region, looking at the broad picture of the specific housing markets, which are well beyond the borders of the city of Youngstown or the city of Lakewood, et cetera, to what's the regional mix. Where it fits into the bigger picture is this is an examination of our housing conditions, housing market conditions in Northeast Ohio, and what impediments are there. One of the impediments we think are that it's going to evolve, and we've already kind of seen this a little bit, is the mismatch between where people live and where they work, and the absence of transportation options to get people there. So by examining the conditions in the housing market, at the same time we're working with our transit agencies to look at the transportation locations, working with the economic development actors of where are the jobs and where they're likely to be. We think this will help individual communities, our metropolitan planning organizations, and the region as a whole seek a better and more effective match between where people live, where they work, and how they can get there, and what we can do to provide as a region more transportation choices and promote a more equitable housing market. it's very clear from the work that has been done previous to our efforts that the issue of equity and concentrations of poverty is a major economic drag to this region. So as we're looking to be competitive, understanding where our housing is, where our jobs are, where our transportation is, and how we can get a better matchup is one of the broad goals of this initiative. And by doing this at the same time, as opposed to that we're looking at the other factors, as opposed to something that is off to the side, allows us to, I think, get a much clearer understanding of the economic dynamics of the region.
There's a couple other questions.
Yeah, I guess my question involves the non-entitlement communities and counties. We just finished an AI last year, another county did. And the question comes down to is whether, when this is completed, does that then enable us not to have to do that the non-entitlement?
Yeah, for the remaining period.
Let's turn it over to the HUD rep.
Yes, it does.
Do we get a refund if we just did it?
No. We know that you just did it.
Yeah.
The other thing is that under this grant, the fair housing equity assessment is mandatory. And that's why when he did the 2 slides comparing them, that's why he did them, to show you that the regional analysis of impediments is only that much more. It's only a little bit more, but it'll serve a bigger purpose for everyone. And we see it as a savings for everyone. It'll also affect the housing authorities because they have to certify that they're in compliance with the settlement communities AI.
And Lucy, you just reminded me, as far as cost savings, I think, Hunter, you started to touch on that. I think I understood you to say that's still being calculated.
Yeah.
We asked Lucy to get us the real numbers, rather than us trying to call around. What's the bill for all this work that's being done, understanding it's sort of ongoing and phased in, and what can we then say to the Assistant Secretary? Here's what it costs to do a regional AI. Here's what it costs to do the old-fashioned way. Here's the savings. It's really one of the arguments for doing certain things at a regional level that we're spending a lot more money doing at a local level. We can all benefit from the same analysis. And again, one of the frustrations that people have when they do the individual ones is Lorraine County is not a single, it's part of a larger housing market. Northern Summit is part of 2 housing markets. Akron attaches to both. This allows you to be a lot more sophisticated in understanding what's out there. Good for the local level or where you're working.
Nothing else? Thank you.
Thank you. And the next presentation will be by Joe McDowell on the dashboard overview. And as you know, the dashboard is one of the products that was identified this summer as one of the things we want to come out of this. HUD does have, as part of our grant, the requirement that certain metrics be addressed. That's considered for the dashboard. But I think the discussion that we had this summer is this organization wants to have a more robust product, and so we're asking Joe to bring us up to date on where that is.
Thank you, Hunter. I don't have a microphone. I don't think we have one. I am really grateful that the gentleman from Lake County and the lady from Stowe and the representative from Geauga County spoke initially, because it reminded me of how diverse perspectives and people are within this region. I'm not from Northeast Ohio. I've been here a year, and I spent the first few months of my time here driving around Northeast Ohio, visiting farmers on their farms, visiting members of the Farm Bureau, visiting property owners, nursery owners, vintners, folks who really were responsible for large sections of land within this 12-county region. And it was important for me to learn from them what they cared about for their future and helped me to realize how important it is for us to really listen to them and to let them guide the ultimate outcomes of whatever we're going to do here. Because it's really something for the region and the people who live and do business in that region. It's not, what we're doing here is not something that we want to, at least for me, I don't want to impose anything on anyone. To do all the driving around this 12-county region, which is quite large, I had to buy a car. And I had not, this is the first car I ever bought. And I had not owned a car before. And I quickly discovered how beneficial all the instrumentation in the car can be, from telling me how far I had to go to get to my destination, to whether I had low tire pressure, to whether my clock was set to the right time. And all of these instruments compile together form what we often call a dashboard. And that's the way that I think about this tool that I'm going to talk with you about, because when I heard the word dashboard, I had no idea what people meant by a dashboard. But the more I thought about my car and how important the car was to me to do my job in Northeast Ohio, the more I realized that's what the dashboard's purpose is in what we're doing here. We need to have some way of understanding how we are progressing towards the goal that this region establishes for itself, and how we are progressing towards that goal, and our health as defined by the people who live and work here, who raise their families here, their children, their grandchildren, and every subsequent generation, how they want their future to be. And so, with that being said, that's how I understand the dashboard, and that's the kind of dashboard that I want to get your help in putting together for the purposes of this planning initiative. This dashboard will be comprised of data that has to fulfill a lot of objectives. The first objective is that this dashboard has to include data that's easily accessible and is available across all 12 counties. If it's only available across 9 or 10 of the counties, that's not going to be good enough. We need to have the data available across all the counties, because this is a 12-county approach. We also need to have data that reflects what really matters, what do people really care about, what is the most important stuff to know about this region, and especially how that measurement of this data is going to take place, and to make sure that we all understand and agree on the measurement of the data that we want to put into this dashboard. The dashboard data has to be updated regularly, it has to be accurate, and it has to be variable. And what that means is that if we have data that's measurable, that is available across all 12 counties, but it doesn't change very much year to year, so it doesn't help us to gauge how we're progressing over time, then it won't be as useful. It won't really help us understand whether we're making any progress or whether we're spinning our wheels in place. The data in the dashboard has to be relevant to all audiences. I learned as a planner when I was first starting out that you plan for everybody, which means you have to listen to everybody. All groups, whether they have homes or not, no matter what color of their skin, no matter what they believe in, no matter what they care about, they're all part of the public that you serve. And so it's going to be critical that this dashboard has data in it that reflects the interests of those audiences. It has to be searchable, it has to be public, available to all the different groups I just described, and it has to be presented in a way that's powerfully visual, that really makes an impact, that everybody can understand. And then finally, this data has to be conducive to collaboration and taking action. In other words, if I saw, which I did see a couple months ago, a little warning light on my car dashboard that said you have low tire pressure, I thought, well, maybe I have a flat, maybe it's just out of balance with the other tires, but I had to take action, go to the dealership and have them look at the car to make sure that I didn't have a more serious problem. So we want data that's going to prompt collaboration and action within the region and not just be interesting on an interactive website. The benefits to having a dashboard for our region is that obviously it will help us gauge progress on moving towards the vision that everybody in the region contributes to create what this vision might be. It provides us with indicators that are both actionable and very meaningful to everybody who's outside this room. And I'm glad you're all here because you are people who have not normally been in this room, and yet this dashboard is supposed to help you. If you're not here, then this dashboard is useless. Because we don't need a dashboard for ourselves. We want a dashboard for everybody who's not part of this group at the table. And then finally, we want this dashboard to be a mode of engagement, a way to connect with people, a way to make sure that we are reaching out to people and they are in turn reaching out to us and saying, hey, why aren't you measure it? We want to hear that kind of feedback and be engaged with everybody. The scenario planning process, which is a way that we're going to engage all of the people outside of this room to come up with a vision for the region, has a very specific role for the dashboard because it's the input from stakeholders through this engagement that's going to help us craft the indicators and the measures of the kind of data that are going to be important. And this data has to capture all of the values, the priorities, what everybody cares about, what everybody thinks is valuable for their farm, their property, their business, their community, their neighborhood, their world, so to speak, that is part of Northeast Ohio. I mean, the region is really a compilation of all of these individual worlds, and we want to make sure that what we measure in the dashboard is something that reflects what people care about the most. There has to be, out of this engagement process, a shared commitment to collaborate. And there has to be a common ground. And we hope that we can try to build common ground and collaboration through the engagement process to help both the vision that we want to realize through scenario planning and the dashboard to help us assess our progress in reaching that vision. There has been a little bit of work done already by the work streams. I don't want to say little, that's trivializing it. There has been some significant early work done and ideas for potential indicators given to us. These are not going to be the indicators, and I don't even know if these are all indicators necessarily because those are my next steps, which I'll talk about in a moment. But these are first steps towards thinking about what could be in the dashboard. But ultimately, we have to go out and reach out to all the communities and stakeholders in this region to find out what is important to them. We have to get started, though, and this is a start for us. And this is going to be a fluid product. The dashboard is something that is going to be changing over time. It's dynamic. We want it to be dynamic. We want to get feedback from people who read it, who criticize it, who want us to change things. And we want to have good, open dialogue about what the dashboard will be. So my next steps are to take those starting concepts, indicators, whatever you want to call them, to refine them, to try to select them, and to think about different performance criteria for what we hope this dashboard will ultimately contain and represent. That it resonates with the public, that it's sensitive enough to reflect annual change, that it reflects the livability principles in accordance with our grantor, that it brings indicators down to the ground and makes the indicators real to people, real to the people who we hope that this dashboard will help, and that the dashboard data is actionable within a fairly short time frame. And we want to make sure that that action is effective policy change or changes that will ultimately help the region move to a place where it affords a higher quality of life for the people who live and work there. Finally, my hope is that among the metropolitan planning organizations that there are people who really see the need for having this kind of a tool and who advocate on its behalf and who will work with me and work with the dashboard working group to make this a reality. And if anybody is interested, whether you're on the board or not, in participating in the working group to help develop this dashboard, please come and talk with me, and I'd be happy to have you serve. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Jason.
I think the concept of the dashboard is great. It's one we talked about for a long time. I think you did a great job presenting a vision for it. And I think it is one of those things in our organization, for example, at AMAX, we're doing a new regional transportation plan. I think we're working on incorporating the dashboard for transportation into that. So I think we'll work real closely with NEOSCC on some of the indicators that we had. But my question had to do with, we spent a fair amount of time and effort on the conditions and trends platform that was put together at the beginning of the summer. And for those of you that might not be as familiar, that has some, I think it's around 23 findings about different measures of sustainability in Northeast Ohio and different regional trends. And it's an online tool. I know Jeff's going to talk about the website in a second, but I think that's a good basis for starting the conversation.
That's essentially what this is.
Okay, good. I just couldn't read this.
I know, these tables never translate well to PowerPoint presentations, but that's, and I should have been specific. This is essentially a summary of the work that we did on the Conditions and Trends platform. This is broken down by work streams, and these indicators came out of the issues, the data points, the discussion points that are in this.
So the tie-in is that the conditions and trends would serve as kind of the initial foundation or building block.
Exactly.
That's perfect. That was my long-winded question.
Yes. It's a starting point for us, but ultimately engagement of public stakeholders is going to have to realize what the dashboard ultimately contains. But yes, this is the starting point straight out of the platform.
It seems like there is a lot of discussion, not just among this group, but among a lot of different groups within Northeast Ohio about dashboards and the desire to put together dashboards. Do you see
And there are dashboards currently.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you see an opportunity for this, the dashboard that's being developed through this process, to be a part of perhaps some of those other things, or how might a kind of crosswalk like that work?
Well, the dashboard that has been in place the longest, to my knowledge, is the dashboard of regional economic indicators that was put together under the auspices of the Fund for Our Economic Future. And that dashboard has been public since 2006, and it's updated annually. And I definitely sat down with Brad Whitehead and Mary Scott Siebel and Emily and talked about their dashboard, which is now being called factor analysis. They said dashboard was the wrong word, but it was called a dashboard for several years, and asked them, how does this dashboard that I'm supposed to put together for Northeast Ohio, how does it reflect what you've already done? Because I don't want to reinvent the wheel if we already have a dashboard. And they said yours is going to be rather different. So a lot of the language in here reflects what they envision the regional dashboard to be, which is a bit different from their dashboard. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but we definitely, there is a bit of overlap, and they're involved in my working group for the dashboard. So they'll be on board. Brian Stubbs with the Overland Project, they have developed a bio-regional dashboard that I visited online, and that's very interesting, although it's rather limited at this point to just the city of Overland. The Sustainable Cleveland 2019, they have put together a dashboard, and I've been in contact with Jadita McGowan about what they have developed, although it's still a work in progress. And there are dashboards in neighboring regions as well. Pittsburgh has developed a dashboard for itself. Northeast Indiana around Fort Wayne. They have an online dashboard, and of course, I think we were looking at the San Diego dashboard as a model, I think, very much for presentation, the data they included. So absolutely, this should not be developed in isolation in a company. Yes, sir.
This is more of a kind of general question. I'm sitting here trying to get my head around this whole NEOSCC thing, so forgive me my newness to the group. As I said, I'm on a discovery. So I'm trying to figure out, what is this NEOSCC thing? I go to your website and I'm reading, it's the first of a kind 4.25 million federally funded grant driven by the Housing Development, Urban Development, Sustainable Communities, U.S. Department of Transportation, and U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And so, as a citizen of Ohio, a sovereign state, and a citizen of Geauga County is sovereign county. I'm trying to get my head around having the federal government come in and try to steer the vote when we have elected officials who are charged with doing this sort of thing for our community and for our citizens. Why is it that we have the federal government, HUD, usurping the sovereignty of the state of Ohio to do something? I mean, I'm asking that as a question. What is the sense of the people around this table? Are you not afraid of a federal organization coming in and driving the vote? I want some responses from that.
My initial response is that the federal government and we, as taxpayers, all make contributions into communities. HUD, EPA, and DOT working together, we're trying to get the best bang for our buck. We're trying to say, let's not just have one group make a decision over here and another group make a decision over here. If we all learn to talk to each other and engage the community to talk with us, maybe we can make our federal investments in a smarter way.
That's up to the citizens of the state of Ohio, not for the federal government to come in to people and tell the people in the state of Ohio how to do our business.
I didn't ask you to be told, I asked
if we want to do things that are inconsistent or detached, I don't care what the federal government runs. The states created the federal government. They have 17 enumerated rights in our Constitution. I took an oath to defend the Constitution twice. Once in the military when I went overseas to fight in the Vietnam War. The second time when I sit down to be a county commissioner. I take that oath seriously. When the federal government comes in and tells me they start steering the vote, I say to the federal government, take a hike, go back to Washington. It's not your place to come into my county and to tell me how to do business.
Commissioner, I think one of the distinctions here that I would argue is that in this case the federal government provided grant to fund this.
We'll give the grant back. I don't want the grant.
But we don't have folks from the federal, I mean, Lucy's here at the table, but she's not a board member. The people making decisions on how to implement sustainable community solutions and recommend things back to elected officials, everyone who sits on this board is from Northeast Ohio. Nobody on this board is from Washington. And I think the other distinction is whatever recommendations this group makes, these are going to go before elected officials that serve on our metropolitan planning organizations, run some of our other local units of government. So I don't think anything decided or recommended here is going to happen unless elected officials that represent the people buy into it. That's my perspective.
Well, I'm just kind of curious, who chartered this organization? Who started the ball rolling? I mean, who's controlling this?
Yes.
Because there is a term socialism, you may not want to consider it. Go look up the dictionary definition. That's government control of production. Government control. As a sovereign state, I'm very concerned when I see government, federal government coming in, and I see federal government stamped all over this.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm all wrong, maybe I'm all wet, but as just a new person here, and I'm getting little inklings and little flags going up, and I'm very concerned when I see something.
Go ahead.
Well, I will, I guess follow up on what Jason said. You know, the federal government didn't come and twist our arm to start this project. We put together a consortium of local institutions in Northeast Ohio, which includes four NPOs. These are metropolitan planning organizations. And as you know, the members of the boards of those organizations are elected officials. So each of those entities join the consortium as a result of the vote of their elected officials that serve on those boards. So the origins of this are not from Washington. The money to fund it is a federal grant. There's no doubt about
And when you take federal dollars, you're beholden to your master.
Yes, sir.
Well, that was the choice we made, was to accept those funds. Now, if you want, and we're doing this project, and we chose to do it. Again, the federal government didn't come and twist our arm to do it, and elected officials participated in approving our putting together this coalition. We call it consortium. And, you know, at the heart of it, this is my perspective, is when we, I've been participating in the Regional Prosperity Initiative, and I know some of the materials that characterize all this also refer to the Regional Prosperity Initiative as though it's also a socialist conspiracy. But my involvement in that was to try to, and it was from the perspective of a small suburban community, and my experience was that as individual communities, we were fighting against one another in competition for economic development, and we would give incentives. And these are local governments giving incentives to private companies in order to attract them to our communities. And it seemed to me, and many mayors that I talked to, that when we have individual fragmented healthy economy. So my involvement in all of this beginning 5 years ago was to try to explore whether we can have a more robust regional strategy that isn't as fragmented as historically it has been. And the whole notion of sustainability, and I know that I've read some of the materials on the connection to Agenda 21, and I have not myself been convinced that we are dupes of some international conspiracy to the idea of sustainability is to have growth, economic growth, that does not threaten the environment. I think there's been a long-standing debate nationally about, in our currently modern society, about balancing economic development with environmental protection notions, and not just either leaning in one direction or sacrificing economic development for the sake of pure environmental protection. So the question then ultimately is how do you find that balance? And that I don't think is a balance you can find just where individual communities try to achieve that balance. It's a broader rivers don't run only within political boundaries. They run across political boundaries. So there are many issues that we face that we cannot face as individual communities. So my perspective on this is that in order to have a healthy economic development strategy balanced with a healthy environmental protection approach that recognizes that environmental issues do not stop at the boundaries of our political subdivision. There are a number of things that we have to approach not on an individual community basis, but on a regional basis. So, in short, there are many things connected to that. But for me, that's at the core of what we're trying to do. We're trying to have a healthier approach to this. Now, we were talking about that long before this federal grant came along. And we were trying to develop more of a regional strategy for land use and infrastructure planning as a more logical way to try to approach some of those issues. Not that every issue is subject to or amenable to that regional planning approach. The federal grant came along and seemed to correspond to some of the things we were trying to achieve. And we thought it was a wise thing to participate in that, to try to take some of the principles that we were trying to apply, get some additional money to apply those principles. So in my experience, that's been the evolution of this project.
And I would argue this. I would agree conceptually, and Grace and I just had this conversation here a week or so ago. Conceptually, us working together to collaborate to make Ohio better, to make the region better, great thing to do. I mean, me getting together with people in Ashtabula, getting together with people in Cuyahoga County is great. The issue that I have, and I'm just going to plant the seed with you, and think about it. I'm right now studying MPOs and whether or not we even need to be in an MPO. Because what comes with the MPO are the rules that from the federal government and how you redistribute the money that comes out of the government. And there are strings I don't like. If you read map 21, that was created by Barbara Boxter, in my world, a very left-leaning person, and approved to a very left-leaning Senate. It's a political thing. If you look at the streams in the tone of that law, I don't like that law. And so, but we're bound to it as an NPO. If we, as Northeastern Ohio, got together and had a Northeastern Ohio regional planning organization for doing transportation environmental planning, I'm on board. Where I don't like it as a citizen, and I apologize for this view, I'm just one citizen, one view. Like, what's the old saying? Everybody's got an opinion. But I don't like the strings that are attached to the laws when we're just the puppets. We got the puppet master out there jerking our strings. Our money is taken away from us. Our percentage is given back with the strings. I don't like that process. And so I'm a little suspicious of this. Again, I'm here to evaluate, is this good, is this bad, should Geauga County be a part? Are you good people, bad people? Do I need to be threatened because you guys are going to come somehow take over Northeastern Ohio? I'm trying to evaluate that. I think you're all good people. I mean, I sit around with you, I sure get that. So. But I think you maybe just diluted a little bit because you're not looking at some of what I'm looking at. I read a lot, so. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. If I might, Commissioner, and I appreciate the concern, and I appreciate everybody's concern, and I thank Mr. Cummings, to tell you the truth, take the time out to address the ball. To address one of your statements earlier, as Commissioner Kyle County, you surely recognize that you receive federal money.
And I'm trying to reduce that to the extent that I can, trust me.
He's jargon, it's a big difference.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I knew what you were
The nuances escape me. Ask
the two commissioners to raise and how I feel.
Sorry, Grace. Mr. Chairman. But you realize, you recognize you receive federal money as a county, and all federal money comes with federal regulations attached to it. I mean, I assume you accept it. I mean, for doing your projects and activities within the county. So, what I see, and creative anyone loses that, what I saw here, and believe me, I had some issues with this whole approach, but it's the game, we're playing, and just like any other grant program, whether it be state or federal, there are regulations. What I saw was, when I was a mayor, and I was a mayor for 16 years, one of my frustrations was when I needed to deal with a community issue that transcends the boundaries of HUD, EPA, and DOT, where there were elements of all three to need to deal with the issue to improve the quality of life in my community. I was dealing with three separate silos at the same, trying to deal with three separate silos on three different funding tracks, on three different funding cycles, with three different sets of rules. And it was like, why don't I just run through a wall and get it over with? Well, what I was enticed by here was that three agencies were agreeing to say, we'll share our allotted resources to try to address issues that have all three elements to them in one way, one time. That, to me, is extremely efficient. It's a wise use of resources, and it's actually beneficial. That being said, that's what I'm here for. I don't know, I read the literature here, and I'll be honest with you, if this is foreign to me, maybe I need to do more educating, maybe there's something I'm missing, but I haven't heard any of this at this table since the beginning. And in fact, I want to make this point. From the very beginning, I was involved in this thing since we started to write this thing that we call the Northeast Ohio Sustainable Community Consortium. And one of the first things we did as a board was we said there are going to be three things happen here because we realize that there are divergent opinions. One is this has to be totally inclusive of all elements of Northeast Ohio. Inclusivity is a policy of this board. And we were mandated by the board action as well as by HUD action to reach out to all segments of the community to engage in this process and actually be represented in this process. Two, having transparency. As a private corporation, we go way beyond public record laws in making everything we do, we said, available to anybody who wants to see it. And that's why the website's there, that's why the invitations go out, this is going to be, everybody is welcome to No, the decision-making process is going to be open. And three, that we were going to solicit participation from all sectors of the community. Now, I believe Jeff will be addressing engagement in a little bit, or somebody is, right? And now it's this and that. But just to allay some fears that I hear here, I appreciate your concerns. I'm not dismissing them at all. I don't want to do that. I want them at the table. I would suggest, as part of those three principles that we adopted, that the members who are here from the public that have those concerns, it would be natural and appropriate to invite you to be involved in this process. I really believe we need you at the table, because you may have, and I really do, a view that's divergent enough from the commonality view that some may have accepted by just because they accepted it,